Cheers, friends, and welcome to another edition of the Mystery Wine Blind Tasting here at Field and Main. I am your host, Neal Wavra. Welcome. Who's with us tonight? Oh, man, this is a good one. This is opening up more and more. I just opened this about 5 minutes ago as I sat here in preparation for tonight's tasting. As you jump on and join us, I'd like to remind you at the outset that we will be pausing this tasting group for the next 2 weeks and picking it up again 2 weeks after this point. So next Thursday and the Thursday after we close, but the Thursday following that we will be back open. And the wines for that week and the week following that are available now. And going into August, we have a couple of weeks where we'll be tasting, and then we're going to close down for the middle 2 weeks in August and reopen again for that fourth week of August and going forward. And those wines too in August and into September will be available by the end of this week. So Trish and Andy and Kathy are here, so we can begin and have a consistency to our tastings because they're here almost every week, which is wonderful. And so are the Latemans, Allison and David. Thank you so much. Oh, and you had a yummy lunch with us today. Oh, that's fantastic. I'm delighted to hear that on Sunday, excuse me. So glad you could come out. Thank you for that. We appreciate it. The love and support from this tasting group coming in. Speaking of that, Kathy Lang-Wiedemann was here the other night for Rich's birthday in advance, and Rick Davis just joining us now. He and his wife were in tonight, picked up a bottle, and then went home in time to be able to join us. And the Verses are with us tonight too, which is great. Hello, everybody. Delicious dinner this evening. That's great. And the Shirleys are here tonight too. Great. Hello, guys, gals. We have an interesting one. So let's do something we don't do all the time. We've done a couple times as we kick things off. Write down or take note of your first impression, right? Before you work the process. Sometimes, especially as you have more experience, and a lot of us now have a lot more experience, sometimes there's something about a wine that screams something to you right out of the nose, right out of the glass, right in the nose, and you decide, I think I have an idea. And I've always advised against kind of sticking solely to that idea. It can be like a tractor beam that just pulls you in and you can't see anything else. But take note of it, because sometimes that intuition, you're building up a muscle memory, a taste memory, that can really inform you something by way of an intuition, and putting the pieces together, not in the deductive way that we do, but instead just by giving it to you. And I think I had that experience with this wine already. So if that's happening for you, take note of it. And what you do in that circumstance is to begin to work on that issue, on that wine, but also open yourself up to what else it could be and force yourself into other camps. So maybe we'll use that as sort of a model for how we do this evening as we say hello to Jan as she joins us, which is great. Hi, Jan. Allison, yeah, you ran into some other folks picking up some wine this weekend, which is great. We did sell a number of these wines, so folks are going to be at least hopefully tuning in, if not tonight, then at future points. I saw Ann McCarty picking up wine for her and John today, so hopefully they're on the chat tonight joining us, and Susan Crandall's with us this evening. So to that note, what kind of jumped right out for me was, and I have to work at describing what this is, but it smells like a Côte du Rhône to me. It smells like a Grenache-based blend wine to me. I think that smell, what came through the glass was a little bit of a higher alcohol, a little bit of blue fruit, some red and black fruit, a heat that's behind that fruit. So kind of almost more like a distillate or a distillation of that fruit as opposed to just the fruit itself. And here's where the challenge becomes, where the challenge comes in, in that you begin to try to prove what you think you smelled and what you know, and then you miss out on the opportunities to taste other things. So what you should do in this case, and what I try to force myself to do then, is to reset and to work the grid, to work your process, and then look to see if what you initially got really is what you're finding as you're going along, and if not, then you let go of it. But if you do, you're onto something, and it is taking you somewhere, and that's a positive for sure. Chris is saying he totally agrees with the call, and I appreciate that. Rob, Kathy, and Shannon, hello to you. Susan, you're picking up caramel? Mm. There's the distillate. There's also a concentrate of fruit here. When you get unsweetened fruit juice that is just pure, kind of like that pomegranate juice that you can get black cherry juice, you can get currant juice, and you take a sip of it and it's not really an appealing juice per se because it needs to be added to something else. It's just pure, unadulterated, tart kind of fruit juice. That concentrated aroma is what I'm picking up in the nose here already. Oh, cool. Tanya's with, yeah, Adrian told me that you guys were going to be doing this together this week. So Robert and Tanya and Jeff and Adrian, welcome, welcome. We're diving in, and as you've just popped on, I was saying that sometimes a wine really jumps out of the glass, and it lends itself to being almost immediately identified by almost in your intuition, by the muscle memory, by the palate memory, the taste experience you've had. So you go with that. And you work with that idea, you formulate the thought process, you let it be, and then set it aside and work the process to see if what you've got initially is actually what you're looking at. So, Jan, vanilla and dark cherry, cool. So vanilla would be an indicator perhaps of some oak, and dark cherry could be a whole host of different grapes, but that's a helpful thing. Jan's picking up little raisins, and raisins would give you an indication probably of a warmer climate, a presentation of the fruit that has a little bit more sun, has a drying sensation to it, at least a warm, hot part of the day. David's saying he's picking up some plum and into cherry. Plum, as we've talked about before, is kind of often an indicator of Merlot. And so, as I said, Grenache-based blend right off the bat, we should add Merlot to that. So what other varietals should we be adding to that before we dive in? So you build out your perspective of thinking like, I have to be looking at a few other things rather than just what I thought initially. The vanilla and dark cherry could absolutely be, say, Shiraz. So one of the grapes of the GSM type blend, but Shiraz or a Grenache blend, maybe we're talking a Grenache blend from Australia. So regionally we can be different. And I was doing that all based on smell, right? And we haven't done anything to do with appearance yet. We haven't worked our way through. Chris is also noting that we could be playing with more Wavra. Thank you for that. So as we step away from that initial impression and work our way through the process, begin to take note or take actual notes of some of the things that we're talking about. And Jan's pulling us back into the appearance and saying there's a little bit of a garnet color to this. Yeah, mine's a little bit of an amalgam of those colors. There's a touch of kind of garnet around the rim for mine, and in at least this case, I think I'm a little bit kind of overcast with the clouds outside. Has a little bit of a ruby tinge to it and a purplish kind of core. So how about you? What are you finding in the way of color? Hey, Krista and John, welcome. Great to have you with us this evening. They were here dining last week and almost crashed our tasting. That would have been fun too. We'll have to figure out at some point now, especially as COVID's sort of in the rearview mirror, how we can do this with a live studio audience. That would be a lot of fun. All right, so kind of a spectrum of color. What do you see by way of the visual that would echo, reinforce, support the ideas that you might have because of the raisin fruit, because of this kind of kirshy kind of distillate fruit? Do we get affirmation for some of what we've smelled already on the visual, i.e. when you see the kind of legs develop, the tears that are forming, they form and they're pretty thick and they're taking a moment to run down. So this would be slow legs. Thank you, Susan. Exactly. Kate, you're saying we should have a live audience, and Susan, you have the applause light with the applause track in the background. Ooh, he nailed the smell, folks. And moving on. So slow legs would indicate, yes, a potentially riper circumstance for the grapes to grow in, right? So a potential higher alcohol because of a ripeness, a greater deal of sugar in the grapes, which would then translate to a higher alcohol. So slow legs for that, so giving us some of that warmth, that really helps to reflect and reinforce the idea that we saw that kind of raisiny, riper profile of fruit. And Kathy has slow legs herself, yes. Slow legs, slow wine, slow legs in wine, they go together. If you drink enough wine, you don't exactly have to have fast legs. Elizabeth is thrown out Amarone, and that's cool because it was a correction for the Amazons. And to my knowledge, yet we haven't tried any wines from Amazon. But that would be a real curveball. But Amarone, giving us that kind of higher alcohol potential, giving us some of that dried raisiny fruit, absolutely. So, kind of that's another great profile, and it's a blend to consider. So if we're talking about Amarone, we're talking about a Côte du Rhône. There's two different options. We were throwing out there, right, a blend, even if it was GSM type of blend or a Mourvèdre-based blend from southern France, or perhaps one from Australia, because of that ripeness and that warmth. So already we've got a pretty cool profile. No worries about the autocorrect. It doesn't like Amarone. Amazon has everything programmed to like it. So understandable. And now understood, so no problem. All right, so we're at a kind of ranging spectrum, interestingly, of color. We have slow legs and some texture in the wine. We have sort of a higher alcohol nose. There's a little bit of a burn there. Cool. Kate, I'm reading your note here. You like sometimes when you get tasting red, you get a whiff of Big League Chew, which is very cool. Thank you for bringing me back to Big League Chew. I try to stuff the whole thing in my mouth and not drool all over myself. But every small piece of that grape-flavored gum is coated in sugar. It's a weird and great smell-induced memory. And that's the power of what I was trying to say in the beginning, that smell memory that you develop and the taste memories that are developed, especially in a circumstance like we have now every week. We are training ourselves. That memory that floods back can oftentimes be very illustrative and give you a big leg up in blind tasting, as long as you don't get stuck. And we have some more fans of the Big League Chew smell. And it does smell like that. So there's a grapey quality to this, which is, for me, an indicator usually of New World versus Old World. However, there were some elements here that kind of reminded us all of the Old World. So let's put a pin in that as we kind of taste it. We'll come back to trying to answer that question. But that overt grapiness, where else would you find that? Grapes like Petit Syrah, grapes like Norton, grapes like Zinfandel perhaps sometimes. So perhaps we're looking at a Zinfandel-like blend. So we're rounding out a rich, robust wine, probably, with a little raisiny kind of distilled fruit character, maybe even confectionery character. And that should help us at least understand what we're tasting on the palate. And if we don't find that, then we're in a whole different place and have to figure that out. But warmer climate, or at least warmer zone, let's see what we got. It is young and fruity. Wow. It has some tannin. It's youthful. It's a baby. And whoo, it just like it blew a tunnel right through my mouth. Like it just barreled right down over the top of the tongue and coated the top of my mouth with tannin. This got in immediately and expanded. This is not a wine to be trifled with. It has some power. It has heat. And by that, when I say heat, I mean I feel right in the back of my throat, kind of almost coming up the throat onto the top of my mouth, a little warming sensation, a heat that's there. This has got some alcohol to it. And yes, per Chris's note, I think it's tannic. We absolutely need to consider Zinfandel. We need to consider something like an Amarone, which has a higher alcohol. We need to consider something perhaps like a very ripe vintage Grenache blend, but maybe not from France as much as it would be from somewhere else. Australia, for example. Perhaps we should be considering sort of a California-oriented wine. And then Petit Syrah. I think I've had a couple Petit Syrahs certainly that have that sort of bubblegum, grapey kind of taste to them. Kathy's echoing that point and reminding me of that, or keeping us on target for that. There's tannins, though, in a way that at least the Petit Syrahs I've tried in the past have had a little bit of a softer profile for them. but they could be bigger. Obviously, Petit Sirah can be a big wine. So tannins, robust profile, high alcohol, it's dry. And how about the acidity? Where are we placing the acidity? That can sometimes help us determine New World versus Old World. But Susan, you're saying some acid. Would you say that's lighter acid, medium acid? Some acid mean medium, medium plus? Is it high acid? Gina, thank you. Yeah. Going back to that vanilla note from Jan, bold vanilla usually equals some form of American oak, maybe some new. And there is this oaky tannin here, and there's a grape tannin. And there's sort of that brash, kind of brusky, bristly tannin that's kind of hanging from the wine that gives you some of that wood tannin. And then there's some more subtle tannin that lies underneath that. That's some grape tannin. And then I think there's some just robust, youthful grape tannin too. And this has all the tannins. Chris, you definitely need a glass. I'm sorry you don't have it, sir, but from what we're describing so far, any thoughts are always welcome, of course. Medium plus acid for most folks. There's a medium plus quality for a few of you. Tanya's picking up a lot more acidity. It gets clobbered by the tannins. And that acidic quality and the tannins can often kind of work together in concert and be something that makes one seem more than the other. And so in concert, both are magnified. And I think that's the case. And you're not finding as much alcohol, Tanya, on the palate as you were on the nose. For me, it's a little bit more, maybe equal amounts. I smelled the alcohol and I'm still feeling it in the back of my throat. But I've been drinking lighter wines lately, so. Chris, I like that this brusqueness of tannin makes you think more of the old world. And so if we're thinking of the old world, Mourvèdre, maybe a Mourvèdre-based blend from the southern part of France. Maybe we're thinking maybe even Bandol, for example, being a southern place in France that is famous for growing Mourvèdre. Maybe we should be thinking, we've tasted them in the past and we've had some super tannin. I don't remember them presenting this way with this grapiness, but we've had Malbec from Cahors, for example, that was big and it was blended with Cabernet. Perhaps we're dealing with Tannat from France, tons of tannin from Maturin. So another place to consider. So we've got Amarone, Côte du Rhône, we've got Maturin, Cahors, we've got Bandol. So all places in sort of the southern part of France and in northeastern Italy. We had Aglianico, which had quite a bit of tannin. Through Petit Sirah out there, we have blends from Australia. What about Petit Sirah from California? What about something like, and forgive me, I'm reaching here, but from Portugal, Baga. Baga is a grape varietal that has a lot of tannin that could be a little bit rustic and have some of this kind of rustic profile. I'm not so sure about the grapey profile, and it's been a long, long time since I've tried one of those. And Tanya, I think, yeah, there is a real youth about this wine that at this point it is sort of a fight within the wine between some of that tannin, that acid, the fruit's there, the alcohol's over here. So it's bing, 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 and that does make this wine kind of a little bit more wonky and not quite as integrated. Monastrell, thank you, Gina. That's a great call too. You're hung up on American oak. So Rioja, Tempranillo, giving us a lot of American oak traditionally from the old world. So all those places we're trying to kind of attempt to say, yeah, there's a quality about this tannin that might be old world in profile, and therefore where would we look in the old world to find it? And yet there is enough American oak that it could be somewhere American. It could be somewhere New World that would be playing with that. But you have a real pronounced tannin profile. 2019, so youthful, Jan, yeah, I agree. And 19 was a pretty ripe vintage, good vintage, warm vintage in most places. So Chris, how is it evolving for you? You're noting that it's evolving quickly, which we're 20 minutes in. This is kind of the witching hour for all the wines that we get the chance to taste. Where they begin to change. Ooh. Yeah, there's a reddish fruit. It's still dry. Tannins are getting more expansive. They layer in on the palate, don't they? They don't dissipate quickly. This is a wine from a pairing perspective that you would want to decant to soften, or if you weren't, you would want to give it as much rare meat and fat as possible, because the tannin will bond, and that's what it's doing into your gums and in your mouth. It's bonding to protein and fat and ready to kind of fall out of perception that way. Kathy's note is that she's not getting as much sanguine kind of bloody meat that she'd expect from Wavra, so she'd go more Côte d'Aron. So maybe a hint of that Wavra element, but more of the Grenache and perhaps Syrah. But I'm not getting that black pepper quality. I'm not getting sort of a meatiness. This is quite smooth for Jan at this moment. That meatiness, there was a Grenache quality to this with the high alcohol element and some of that sort of distilled fruit profile. So when I say that, I'm thinking like Kirsch, like it's a cherry liqueur. And this is still here. It's got a real power. Maybe we're talking about Garnacha. So somewhere from Spain, getting Grenache, but really the Spanish variation on it with more warmth. So I want a rare steak now too. Ooh, man. Or a touch more. Chris is picking up Grenache. All right, so, wow, I need a toothbrush after this too. If we're talking about Grenache, obviously we were initially talking about the southern part of France, and then Spain, and then, like we talked about for a brief moment, Grenache from Australia, Grenache from California, Grenache from Washington State. They're growing some Grenache up there. The Monastrell idea, kind of coming from Spain. Let's try to drill down for a second into where we might find this wine in the world, New World versus Old World. The tannins kind of pulling us into the Old World. The oak profile is pulling us into the New. Some of the fruit aspect is pulling us into the New. So are we in a warm place in the Old World? Are we in a warm place with some Old World sensibility by way of the tannin in the New World? What do you think? And how do you parse that out? Susan, yeah, California Petite Syrah. It's in the running. For me, I was just thinking about that. So your prompt, your question is an appropriate and timely one. I'm thinking, I just don't know that I was going to get this level of tannin from a Petite Syrah. One that really, the tannin is kind of the outer rim of the whole wine. It envelops the whole wine, and inside that, you experience fruit and alcohol. I don't know that I would get that. I just get an easier quality. While big and tannic, the tannin in the Petite Syrah I've tried is like in the inside of the experience. It's there, it's pronounced, but it's not the experience. Okay, Tanya, I'm sorry, I paused to read your note there. Clunky and obvious oak, stronger tannins, alcohol throughout, makes her think of the New World, like South America, but not sure variety there. There are producers gosh, what was the name of it? I'll try to think of it as we're rolling through this. But there's a producer in Argentina that we used to carry that made an Amarone style production. So raisinated fruit, powerful, in South America. And so you had sort of this production that was an Italian group making wine in South America with Malbec and with, I think it was Cabernet and maybe Syrah, something like that. It was an interesting blend that had power. Didn't have as much tannin as this, was silkier than this, but had power, and it was Amarone style. And I would agree with Susan, this is, I don't think, Amarone itself. I'm not picking up the same amount of raisiny kind of profile, and there is this sort of, it's this red-blue fruit for me that comes through kind of in Grenache that I'm having a hard time walking away from. So to the Petite Syrah thing, New World, that tannin kind of enveloping the whole thing takes me back to the old world, but puts me in a place like Spain. And I think you could make an argument very comfortably for the Petite Syrah. I think you could make an argument easily for a South American kind of variation on this, but it's the tannin and the rusticity of that tannin that pulls me back into an old world setting that has new world potential in the way of its production, because it has like California warmth. It has sunshiny days, and that kind of takes me to Spain. So Kathy's thinking Grenache-based Côte du Rhône, 50% Grenache, 20% Syrah. Yeah, Kate, for me, I'm kind of in the Garnacha camp. Someplace in Spain, Jumilla or something that has this power and isn't shying away from it, and the grapes are ripe and alcoholic, and the skins are thick because they survived a while into harvest or through the growing season, and having almost a near late harvest with this skin that was capable of withstanding the sun. So yeah, I'm in the kind of Garnacha camp, I think. Yeah, Kathy, I agree too. There was about 15 minutes in, there was this kind of perfumey note. There's a floral note that sort of wafted gently out in between the tannin and the fruity notes and some of that vanilla quality. This is what I find befuddling and endlessly fascinating about Grenache, if it is in fact Grenache, is I never know exactly where it's going to come from. Like, I have a general sense with Pinot Noir, right? And I like the spectrum that you get from Pinot Noir. Maybe at the ripest version of it, I don't is preferred as much personally, but I have a sense. Grenache can be light and red and dusty and almost ethereal, and it can be blockbuster power, one of the most tannic, bold wines you can find. And as I understand more and more about Grenache, it seems to have as much to do with the warmth in which it's grown, kind of the climate, as it does the sand versus sort of a clay soil versus sort of a rocky soil. The sand giving you kind of more of that lighter profile, and the clay kind of darker soils, richer soils giving you more power, and the rock sort of being in between. I have a lot more to learn about Grenache and to appreciate the potential spectrum. But from the blind tasting perspective, that means that almost every time you taste a medium to medium plus bodied wine that has some of these profiles that we're talking about, red to black to blue fruit, you should consider Grenache. It's something that should be sort of on the table almost all the time, and maybe quickly you can dismiss it, but it should be something that you have like in your continual Rolodex. Like, it's gonna happen, I'm gonna think about Grenache, this is red wine. I'm gonna think about Grenache every time. So licorice coming out for Elizabeth, yeah, I like that too. That bubblegum note is still there, that candied powdered sugar element still there. Sharon, I'm sorry you don't have the wine with us tonight, but yeah, I'm really looking forward to this too. I guess we're nearing the witching hour too. We're nearing the final hour, I should say, that where we should should make a final go, but this wine continues to give you a little bit more and more, and that makes you want to spend a little bit more time with it. There's a little bit of meatiness now coming out, sort of the Maillard reaction is the caramelization of protein, so the grilling, when you kind of brown meat, you get the Maillard reaction, and that's what's kind of coming out of this wine at this point. There's like the outside sear of a steak, which, per our earlier point, is of course rare and served and presented with this. All right. Yeah, I think I'm comfortable. I think I'm at a spot where I know where I'm going to go, besides to the restroom afterward to brush my teeth. I think I'm in Spain. Garnacha, kind of maybe a Garnacha blend, but certainly Garnacha 2019 young wine. It's got some power, and 14 plus alcohol is sort of my thought. How about all of you? Where are you going to put your flag? Kathy was indicating that she was going to be 50+% Grenache, kind of Côte du Rhône. What about the rest of you? Where are you at right now before we do this grand reveal? Susan's agreeing with me, which is a joint working effort here. Kathy is gonna say that she's in the Côte du Rhône for sure, because I threw that out there first. Chris likes the Garnacha call. Anybody still for Petit Syrah, or how about for the South American call? Stuck on Zin, Jan? Yeah, we didn't get back to Zin. I think it's for me. It's still about all the tannins. It's a tannin question for me. I don't want to walk away from the Garnacha kind of old world Spain note from the tannin perspective, because Zin would have tannin, but also has a little bit more reddish fruit and a different profile of fruit. Yeah, Tanya, I agree. This wine is a really fun one to blind taste because it takes you all over the place and gives you elements that you might correctly pinpoint as being New World. I mean, right off the bat, Jan's call of kind of vanilla and cherries is like, this is a New World wine we should consider. And then it pulls you back. And so I don't know that we're far off from most of us as we're talking about Côte du Rhône and Garnacha from Spain. We're talking about essentially the same styles of wine produced in two different places with a warm vintage, perhaps in both. And so I think that's a neat part about this wine, is it took us from New World to Old, Old World to New, back and forth, a lot of potential varietals. It presented in an interesting way, and at $25 for us to consider Amarone, which would have been twice the price for sure, unless we got some kind of screaming deal on Amarone. That's neat. It doesn't have to be Amarone to be appreciated, that a wine like this made you think of that for a moment, and that's pretty cool. So let's see. Côte du Rhône or Spanish Garnacha seems to be what we're most jumping to. John's in Spain. Krista wants more steak. Awesome. Fantastic. 2019 is the right call. Côte du Rhône is also the right call. This is Les Promesses, the Promises, from Fond du Vin, 2019, from the family Gonnet. Let's see, does it say at all on the back? They've been producing wine in the Rhone Valley for 3 generations, but I don't have, oh, sorry, there it is. 70% Grenache, 30% Syrah, concrete tank for 8 to 12 months. And wonderfully, this has a note that it was raised in clay and sandy soil. So that's a big important part as I learn more and more about Grenache. Soil plays a huge part in all wines, but for sure that this wine has that element of that clay kind of power, and maybe some of that lighter note from the sand, I think. I'm trying to parse that out as I learn more and more about Grenache. But I am too, Chris, surprised more about the concrete. We picked up so much of the vanilla note that came through with this. And so it'd be interesting to know where this is coming from. And side note, this is 14.5% alcohol. So all of the alcohol we smelled and all of the alcohol we tasted is exactly right. So Cote de Rhone. I had that thought initially, and this is riper than most and more tannic than most Cote de Rhones. This is, there are some that are lighter and easier going. This is a powerhouse for sure. Pretty cool. Gina, yeah, Kathy is not selecting the wines for these weeks, but she does an excellent job of arriving at the selection. And I was talking with her about that. She relies heavily on all of us, just like I do, to crowdsource this in a way that's really meaningful. I was talking with someone the other night about this experience. They didn't know we were doing it. And I said, I'm not a bad blind taster. I'm a pretty decent blind taster, but I'm an excellent blind taster in this group. We work extremely well together. It makes me wish there was sort of the math Olympics in high school where the mathletes compete against each other, and there's the trivia Olympics and things where people are on teams and they're working out puzzles of math puzzles, or they're working out trivia puzzles. We should have a blind tasting team and be able to work together as our team on a particular wine or wines and get to a point where we could guess the wine. That would be a lot of fun. We need some kind of blind tasting Olympics. Perhaps we push for that in subsequent Olympics to come. That would be fun. This wine is opening even more and continuing to evolve. That's pretty cool. This is a wine then, this, I don't know, this is baby. It needs time, but if you have a bottle extra in your cellar and you think about just putting it away, I wouldn't touch it for 5 years and then touch it. And then 5 more years if you had another one, it would be pretty fun to see some of that tannin subside and relax. If you're dead set against opening another bottle now, make that steak, make it rare, and really enjoy it. So cheers to everybody. I will see you in a couple weeks as we take my family and I take a little break and run off for a vacation. We'll be back in that 4th week of July. But Field & Main will continue to operate in my absence, thanks to the able-bodied work of all of our wonderful team here. And wines are available for that 4th week and going beyond that point. So feel free to drop in at any point and pick up those wines. Somebody else, if you wish, jump in next week, 7 o'clock Thursday, open something, talk through it. If I'm around, a working cell phone, I'll jump on and see you. Until then, until we see each other again toward the end of the month, be well, enjoy July, and happy 4th. I look forward to getting back with you here, as I look forward to this each and every week. It means a great deal to me. It's a big part of my week. Thanks a lot, everybody. Cheers.